You ready, Mike? Nearly ready.
You might be on mute, of course.
There we go. You should now hear me. Yes. We're good. We're good. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Okay, and everybody can see the slide. That's the first bit of technology we've got to get past. Yeah, thumbs up. We're good. Okay, well, thanks for joining. I must admit, when I look back at this, I looked at my headline, should it be so hard? I was obviously having a very tough week. And there's been a few of those over the recent sort of 18 months or so. And when I was preparing this, I realized it's so much easier when you could go into the workshop and walk people around. But we will get through this, and hopefully there'll be some good pointers from us, understand what we do, and what we try to improve on certainly over the last 18 months and before that. Bear with me, my buttons have decided not to work, so I'll have to do the old-fashioned way. There we go. So what do we do? Well, Aprico have been around since 1997, and we design, manufacture air pressure stabilizers and pressure relief vents. Air pressure stabilizers fundamentally are healthcare, so they're used in operating theatres, isolation rooms, and the pressure relief vents are used in areas like data centres where they've got gaseous fire suppression systems for relieving the pressure in the event of a discharge. And the theory behind that being, if it's all very well protecting the equipment in the room when the gas goes off, but if you actually do end up sort of blowing out the walls, then you've sort of defeated the whole object of the exercise. So we offer the pressure relief vent from when the gas actually hits the room, just to protect the area. The air pressure stabilizer side of the business is really where we were born from. And so that's where today I'm going to probably focus on and just explain a little bit more about that. I think it's also, with the current situation that we've been through recently, very relevant as well. So just as a brief overview, you could spend half a day going through the design of operating theatres and airflow regimes, which I'm sure would sound very interesting, but at the same time would be a little bit of overkill. But I'll just explain what happens in here briefly. Is we've got different areas in there, from a prep area where the equipment goes into prior to the operation, and these in areas of cleanliness. So these areas are more sterile than perhaps the anaesthetic, and certainly dirty utility, as the name suggests, is the least sterile area within that actual suite. And what you'll have in these rooms, you'll have them at different pressures. The layup prep will be at 35 pascals, the operating theatre at 25, the scrub will be at 25, the anaesthetic designed at 15, needs to be held above 10 in operation. And when all the doors are closed, all air stabilisers are open, and that controls the pressure and flow rates between the rooms. So the staff get on with their work, and what you have is it creates a barrier from the outside world. So effectively, if anybody was to open a door, our stabilisers close and the air goes across the door and provides like I suppose a curtain of air protection, and keeps force in the air. So any airborne particulates don't enter the room, to protect the staff, and more importantly, the open area where they're performing the surgery. So that's the sort of fundamentals of how that's designed. There is, with the NHS, there's a HTM document for operating theatres, there's for water management and fire. We are interested, from our perspective, in the specialised ventilation part of that health technical document, and that's where this is based on. Now, the air pressure stabilisers themselves, this is in a bit more detail from a manufacturing point of view. On this side here, we do various sizes, because within the operating theatre suites, they're never the same. Although we follow a guidance document, depending on the size of the room and the number of rooms in an operating theatre suite, they will vary in size. And they may be fire rated, non-fire rated, smoke fire rated. These are to keep things easy to break the parts down. These are the non-fire rated standard ones, which you would see in most operating theatre suites in most of the rooms. And within this, building this up, we have different assemblies and sub-assemblies. So this area here, this is the blade which sits inside the frame, and this is where we control the settings for the pressures and the volumes between the different rooms. So this is a sub-assembly built up here. So when we issue a job card down to the workshop, they will be given a list of bill of materials and scan sheets. So when they start the process, they will scan onto the project, they will pick the parts they need, and then they will also scan their times as they work through. The interesting part is, although we issue the bills of materials, that most of the guys have been doing the job so long that they don't actually need the bill of materials to pick the parts, but the scan sheets are very useful for keeping track of the time as they're working through and giving us visibility. So as you can see from what we've got here, we've got different components. We've got some plastic, it's the Cetal plastic. We've got some foam parts here as the stops, and this is a Zintec coated painted blade and an aluminium extruded frame. So the ability this gives us, that we realized probably about 4 years ago that time-wise, everything was fully fabricated, every single frame was welded up. And then we realized that we could actually improve our performance by going to extruded. So we stock various different sizes of different widths and heights, and then we build them together like a little kit, and we can just call off the various bits and build up to the different sizes as needed. So that's made us far more dynamic and responsive to our customer base, and meant it a lot easier to control our stock rotation of what we keep, because every job previously was built to order as a fabrication, and as manufacturing people, that takes an awful lot of time to organise those things, whereas at least this gives us some flexibility around this. We've had to buy the tooling, obviously, for the injection mouldings, and we have a series of different tools now at a couple of different suppliers, which again helps us with if we do have the peaks or the mad rush on bits going through, we can call on a secondary supplier to boost the parts that we need. This is part of the workshop, and we've got into zones. So this zone here is for the healthcare section, and in front of that, then we pull forward and they assemble in front of there. This section's for fire, so fire pull through to here and build here. Across we have our paint shop. This is something we introduced internally in 2018 because we do an antimicrobial coating to the parts that go out to healthcare. And we had other people that did supply us with the parts. We sent them out and they were painted, but we had some quality control issues. And unfortunately, a couple of instances when we checked, they hadn't coated it in the correct paint. So we brought that in-house again for quality reasons. And it gives us flexibility that we can do different colours for people as and when. And it makes it far more quicker and flexible for us as well as the client. And then from there, then we will then pack the goods, mark them up and ship them out. I mean, we are shipping globally as well as in the UK. So there's an awful lot of packing material that resides outside of this shot for the various markets that we do supply into. Now, to the actual, where do we source our parts? Now, this is something which we're very proud of as much as we can. Within a 50-mile radius, 95% of all our parts are brought in from our supply chain. Some of the raw material will have come from the EU or further afield into them, but once it's processed, whether that be aluminium extrusions or the machine components, the sheet metal work, it will be kept in the local facility as much as we can. The locality is so important. We found this so helpful, especially in the last 18 months, that we, if needed, with the shortage of delivery drivers and other bits and pieces, we could actually go ourselves to pick up goods and drop goods off, and that's really, really helped us. In the current climate that we've been in, that's been absolutely invaluable. And some of these suppliers have been with us from the beginning, and it's we've got a good team there as well, so we can call on people to do specials for us at short notice, which is sometimes something you can't get when you're importing containers load of parts in. So the last 18 months or thereabouts, supply chains. This was, we take ourselves back to March 2020, and when we were sort of, the news was starting to escalate, and I remember that I just cancelled flights to go to Hong Kong and Australia, a trip I'd organised with our distributors over there for months and months beforehand, and had to pull the plug on that. And then obviously overnight, it literally all changed, and we sort of came in and we put a plan together what we were going to do, because we'd already had hints that people were looking for support on building the Nightingale hospitals. So consultant engineers have been in touch with us, because these were ad hoc sort of facilities. We really had to sort of think outside the box a bit. It wasn't like a normal build where you could say, right, we're going to build the walls, we're going to build the walls. It's what's existing. So Excel in London, then obviously the rooms existed to a large degree, the main structure. So we had to work with them with a way of producing some sort of pressure control within the areas and what we could do. So that was very good. But then we quickly realised that when we started making contact with people, that some people had closed overnight. They in fairness, they had to, or hadn't really perhaps sat back and planned it. So very quickly we realised that we had to, in some instances, get people to reopen, to actually open up, especially for us, so we could deliver on what we needed to do within the healthcare sector. And I think it was certainly a tribute to some of our supply chain, the hoops that they jumped through, as well as ourselves. But this was when it really hit us, was the supply chain sort of started to creak rather a lot at that point, and continued to be a challenge ever since, if I'm honest. But that was the first thing we noticed, was the initial supply chain sort of closures and temporary shutdowns whilst they organised themselves, that had a knock-on effect to other things as we progressed. Our supply chain costs, as we all painfully are aware of. My apologies. But this was just one that I saw straight away, was that our supply chain was saying we've got a problem with material, and we'd already quoted projects. So, you know, what do we do? I mean, we don't, our supply into our customers isn't purely metal, so it's much harder for the people just supplying the materials into other areas. But it did have an impact on what we were already progressing at the time, and continues to do so since. And we have adapted with it. Certain aspects we've been able to change the materials we've used to something that's slightly cheaper without actually impacting on the quality. But it hasn't been easy, and I'm sure, as we all know, whether it be wood, cardboard, anything around that has been difficult in some cases to even obtain. At certain points, we were running out of boxes, which we used to actually supply some of our parts in. So we had to then revert to alternative methods of packaging, at least in the short term. Freight, it was and remains an issue probably for us all. Certainly for us, and being in Bishopsfroom, I don't think helped us. And it's lovely being in the countryside and looking at the fields, and I must admit I wouldn't change that for the world, and I could go for a walk at lunchtime. But we had a haulier and a courier service both decide that they could no longer provide us with a service. So we had to then seek alternatives. So that was a real shame, because they're both very good sort of service providers to us. So we had to then change again to find an alternative. And we are still, and we're not alone with this, we've had it today where we are struggling at times to actually ship the parts in a cost-effective manner and get a service level that we want. We're delivering into the healthcare sector, which is critical. And we've had a few instances where parts have just gone missing, and we've had to literally do dedicated drivers to take replacement parts in so that the operating theatres can open. That's where we're so critical in the supply chain and what we do, and we appreciate that we need to be on top of it and providing a service level which people expect. And so we are working with new supply chain partners, and it's working. We're getting there. It is getting easier. I know there'll be more challenges ahead, especially as we get close to Christmas and they decide that there's more important things to deliver. I touched on Excel before, and our supply chain put out some great work for us. But really, it was with the staff. I mean, the staff here, I mean, they really did pull together. We all found it very odd and very it's almost disconcerting when we first started travelling into work, and you felt that you were the only car on the road as you drove in, because literally it was, especially around here, there was nothing much happening. So, the guys, we got together and we had to work weekends, evenings, because quite literally they said, guys, we need the impossible from you. We need these parts, in 2 weeks. And normally we'd be looking at a 2-month lead time for some of these parts. So we were calling on some of their supply chain, like I said, but the guys here, and they worked really hard to pull this all together as a team. We did extra special, some shifts at the weekend and long days. This did catch up with us come May, so we had a shutdown. We don't normally have a shutdown, but I said, look, we'll take a week in May. We all need a rest. So we had a week off, and I do remember it well because it was a lovely sunny week, and I think everybody came back slightly red around the edges, maybe too much sun, but it was a much needed respite from all that we'd gone through, and was continuing, because obviously, if you remember back then, the certainty, which still is there to a degree, was with us at the time. So we did an awful lot of work with this. On the top of this as well, we also had people suddenly asking for isolation rooms and turning operating theatres into COVID rooms. And we had an awful lot of discussion about how we changed our equipment that was already in there from what we call a positive pressure regime to a negative pressure regime. So we had an awful lot of work that we had to do, again, with consultants and asking us on our advice, how we could see our equipment working to facilitate this change, which was quite a big one to do. And we had multiple projects moving on from this, but we, the guys certainly stepped up, and it was a tough time, but a very positive one as well, and showed what could be achieved in a very short space of time. On the back of this, obviously, we did get some recognition, which is, again, was a big plus point. We had the Compassionate Customer Care Award, and the sort of feedback that we'd had from the people that we'd supplied at the Nightingale. I think they said it was exceptional. And I think I said to the guys at the time, and they sort of go, yeah, I know. But I said, no, you've been recognised for this now. And it was very important to everybody that came through, and they could see where all their efforts over the time of the previous weeks and months had gone to. So that was a big plus. And I think people certainly have struggled, and for various reasons. I think the staff here, I found the struggle they had was the fact that they were so busy when other people in certain instances weren't. And I think they also found that a challenge, because they were still doing, let's say, the 9 till 5, and other people were unfortunately unable to work. We did have changes here where, when the announcement was made, we had somebody that was about to go on maternity leave that had to immediately work remotely. The person that was supposed to step in to do her role, unfortunately, couldn't join us. So we then had to take somebody that only recently joined the business to do marketing, to take over some production administration. And they did it very well. So you have those things where people do turn around, and I think it showed that with the efforts that we did, how we could be recognised. In amongst all this, we've kept innovating. We've kept pushing the boundaries on the product. We do a product for a very niche market, but we often find there are new challenges within that market. Certainly the situation that happened with, unfortunately, with Grenfell really made people focus on the escape routes within hospitals and other areas. And although there were solutions out there, they weren't necessarily appropriate for the theatre area. So in amongst all this, we were still working, doing research and development, and doing testing at Warrington Fire, which was a very surreal experience, because every time I've been to Warrington Fire before, you're allowed to go in, you have your safety equipment on, but you don't normally have the masks and the gloves and the other protection that you had, and do all the checks and health. And also you weren't allowed to go to their canteen, and you weren't allowed to do this, that, and stay on site as long. And that was very challenging for us, because having all the PPE and trying to install a pressure relief vent sort of 4 meters up in the air was something I hadn't really sort of thought about until we tried it. And it made me appreciate, I'm struggling to do this just for the moment. how these people are doing this in the hospital day in, day out, and in the wards and looking after people is truly unbelievable. But so yes, we kept pushing. I'm saying we're like everyone else, we're not sure what's around the corner. We've got hopes and aspirations, and we've not done badly this year. So we're pleased with that. I think I've got to a point, and I've lost track of time a bit. So I'm hopefully I'm okay and I haven't messed up or gone to. But we're into Q&A.
Thanks, Mike. If you can stop sharing your screen so we can see everyone, that would be really helpful. Thanks so much for, whistle-stop tour of the last 18 months, I think, but definitely some challenges that I think will resonate with a lot of other people on the call. So thank you very much for that. And as you say, questions, you can either put them in the chat, everyone, or please just raise your hand. I think I can see you all on one screen, or just come off mute and ask your question to Mike. Or is he getting away scot-free today?
Mike, how big is your operation?
We've got 15 of us in total working here. So we've got 8 in the office, and then we've got 7 sort of downstairs doing the hard work, as I say. I tell them that.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Can I shout, Sharon? It's Frank,
Yep.
Frank Myers. Interested to know whether you've got intellectual property in your products and how you're finding that in the current climate.
Yeah, we have, and we've not had any issues per se, but we've found it quite. I've not seen any change. That's the leading question? Is that there's been issues, but we've been okay with that?
There's always the risk that China step up their efforts, and I'm just interested to know if you've ever experienced anything like that.
I think from our perspective, at least on the healthcare, that there's an element for us which helps us in such a niche market, in so much as that when we size the product, you have to have a certain level of knowledge of the HDM. So as a company and myself, we help write the HDM along with some other people. So what that helps, because also if somebody does come from China and look at it, it isn't just they could copy the product, but then it would be no good without the knowledge of how to apply the product. And I think that's the key with it. So although we're producing a pressure relief vent or air pressure stabilizer, the knowledge behind that of how you actually use it in application is probably more valuable than the actual item itself.
Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. And Mike, anyone else before we hand over to Stephen? Okay, thanks very much again, Mike. It's really, really helpful, useful. Thank you. And on to a different business altogether. So if I can introduce Stephen from Rayhow to start your presentation. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm just going to hopefully share this with you now. And Hayley's going to tell me if we've got the right setting on. I'm just going to... Yeah, we've got the right setting. Great. Okay, thank you. So yeah, my name's Stephen Beresford. I'm head of marketing and communications here at Rayhow. And I don't know if you know much about Rayhow or have heard of us. Obviously, we are members of the chamber and normally, I think, represented by our chief executive, Martin Hitchin. We headquartered here in Ross-on-Wye, but we have various sites around the UK. Our main manufacturing base is up in Blaenau-Festiniog, where we have a 220-strong factory up there that makes our window profiles. We also have a smaller factory down near Heathrow Airport. We have a sales office in London, Manchester, Glasgow and Dublin. We have a logistics centre in Runcorn, Cheshire, and we also have a recycling plant in Runcorn, Cheshire, which actually I spoke to the Chamber about 3 years ago, actually, a new initiative for us where we recycle old UPVC windows into new polymer granules, and that plant is also based in Cheshire. So all told, we have about 500 employees. We're part of a German group, the Rayhow Group, which is circa €4 billion turnover and about 20,000 employees. We operate really in all corners of the globe. We don't necessarily have offices in every country, as you'd expect, but in all the major countries we have representation. And we run locally here from Ross and Way. We run the UK, Irish and Scandinavian businesses. So what I thought I would talk to you about today, were literally the same topic as Mike really the last 18 months, but more from a communications perspective, because I think for us, as running quite a large business, there were some reasonable challenges that we've learned a lot from. So I'll just start off by moving on to, not if you really need it, but a quick glance at what happened in 2020. And I won't go through all of these milestones, but I'm sure you know that the virus started, the news started to break from China in January, was getting more heated by February, and come March, a national lockdown was announced. And by the 1st of April, we'd actually closed our factory and offices, all but our essential core services. We do supply the rail industry and the utility industries with construction products. And we were asked by Network Rail in particular and London Underground to remain open, to remain contactable, to remain being able to service them from a logistics point of view should they have any emergencies. So we did do that. We kept a core team of people, but we probably furloughed around about 85% of our employees, including all the factories were closed completely. Probably like a lot of you, a few weeks later, we had a letter from, I think the business minister then was Alok Sharma, basically telling us that we needn't have closed and that they wanted manufacturing to continue, and that it was important to the economy and important to keep the country going. So as time went on, by June, we reopened our factory. So this June milestone here, we reopened our factory. And basically what we did then was we reopened our offices as well on the 1st of June. And we implemented something that we called our Safe Site Plan. And our Safe Site Plan was basically, as the title suggests, making sure that all the sites were safe, which included all the usual stuff, the mask wearing. As you can see, the picture on this little image here is of at our factory gate. It's in Welsh and English, and it shows that the coronavirus restrictions that we implemented. We also had some interesting innovations with the health industry, similar to Mike. We were approached by the NHS to make some medical cabinets, which are from a company that we own called Wavis, which is our business down in Heathrow Airport. We make tambour doors there. And these two products under the April banner here were products that we made for the NHS. And also we were approached about making these visors on our 3D printers, these face shields, which we produced some of those to go into the mix, as a lot of people did. But similar to what Mike said, actually, we found that a lot of our customers wanted us to be open, and we started to bring people back from furlough probably quicker than we thought. So we completely reopened our factory on the 1st of June. We started to gradually bring people back into the offices, and we suddenly found we actually had a huge order book. So from going backwards with our sales, actually, we started going very much the other way, going forwards. And that's continued throughout the year, despite all the restrictions. And we get to December at the end here, and this little chart shows, I think, the recovery of our sales. The vertical lines, by the way, are our sales intake on a daily basis. And you'll see as we get to the end of the year, the sales intake really starts to ramp up. So the picture is quite a positive one from a business perspective. But what I really wanted to talk to you about was how we supported people. So supporting our colleagues was really, really important. And probably like most businesses, so I've gone one slide too fast there, probably like most businesses, we relied very much on electronic technology, electronic communications. And we'd suddenly got around about 450 people furloughed at home that were used to working on laptops. We were told not to let them log on. It was told us it was a condition of furlough, so we didn't let them log on. So how do we communicate with them? Well, we simply went to the old ways of paper. We suddenly developed a newsletter that we sent to them monthly to their home addresses that had all the stuff in there regarding what was happening with the company. We gave them in every month how the business was performing, our order intake, our sales. We also produced lots of guidance for employees that were back at work and those that were thinking coming back at work about how to handle the, perhaps some had anxiety around, coming back during the coronavirus period. And over on the right-hand side, some of these letters that you see, we sent about 22 pieces of guidance and advice on things like furlough, on things like benefits, everything else about surviving really the furlough period and the coronavirus period while they were off work. We realized we had to develop more electronic technology for our customers. So in the middle image here with these iPad images, we developed some apps for our customers to use, because equally our sales guys weren't going out and visiting customers. And there again, this image in the bottom right is what the sign back at our factory in Blaenau-Festiniog. Okay, at every site we implemented our safe site plan. So we really focused on colleagues, both those that were on furlough and those that were coming back. And at all times we engaged with them. So even though we couldn't have them log on to our network, there were lots of WhatsApp groups that developed between line managers to talk to their teams. And many teams had little sort of, online Zoom calls or whatever, but they weren't actually classed as business meetings, because we were quite strict with our colleagues. You're furloughed and you don't work while you're furloughed. So that was really how we tended to support our colleagues. As they came back, we did all the usual stuff. We took the measures that we had to. This is our brand host in our London showroom, putting down some stickers on the floor and putting up all the social distancing guidance. Also in our factory, we made sure that we'd got all the measures in place when we reopened our factory. And over in the bottom left is one of our engineers visiting our customers. So we found we had quite a bit of concern initially, but then once I think people realised the measures that we'd taken were pretty robust, and every site was risk assessed, I think we soon got over that period, and our teams really, I think, have not thought twice about coming back into the business or visiting customers since that point. But talking of our customers, what we found also was that, a lot of our customers, like Mike said, they closed, and some of those had to reopen quite quick. And some of them had closed and not really put in a provision for their customers. So some of their customers were contacting us saying, we'd ordered some product from your customer, your product from your customer, but, they've closed. How can you help us? So we actually found that working with the customers and getting them to support existing customers was also a big part of what we did. We also did these Zoom CPDs, and I think, as Sharon mentioned, we have seen some drop off in our Zoom CPDs since, and we did them across all our businesses. So we do a number of products for the construction industry. We do window profiles, as I mentioned. We do district heating pipes. We do hot and cold water pipes for multiple occupancy in tall buildings, and we operated a lot of Zoom CPDs. The one over on the right-hand side of the page is a program that we ran for our window fabricators. Now, bear in mind, these guys have been closed for about 2 months, and our engineers came up with this idea. They said, you know what, we're going to have customers here that have got machinery that's been dormant for 2 or 3 months, and they're going to switch it on and expect it to work. And those of you that are in engineering background know that, a lot of the joints and the bearings need regular greasing, etc., and lubrication. And so we did some CPDs about rebooting your business back up, really, post-pandemic. So these things took place sort of during June, July, August, when our own customers were coming back into doing their own manufacturing, and we supported them through that process. So we did this online learning, but we also went out and visited customers where we needed to support them, because in a lot of the work we do, particularly on our window profile business, their own manufacturing plays a big part in the supply chain. So they use a lot of machinery to fabricate windows, as you'd probably guess. So we supported that process, which was quite important. But as I say, we did do these Zoom CPDs. Initially, we were getting numbers of over 100 plus at some of them, but that gradually dwindled over time, and we found that really there was less and less interest in them. I think we had become fatigued with Zoom. So we've started to phase them out. We still do them where companies don't want in-house CPDs, but what we have found probably in the last 3 months is customers are saying to us, we actually want you to come in now and do a physical face-to-face CPD, or we want your sales manager to come in and have a physical meeting with us. So we've seen so much more of that now than we were last year. We also found that with our customers, a lot of them didn't respond to digital communications. So I think what we had to do, we've done this as our authorized partner program on this MacBook here. We had to start to send out printed material to our customers as well, because they weren't responding to emails. We do mail marketing, social media, and online digital stuff, but a lot of them weren't even opening the emails, we were finding. So we found that the quickest way to reach them and the best way to reach them is to go back to some printed material. This is, of course, was in light of the fact that the sales manager couldn't visit these customers. So we started to go back to doing things like a Windows Solutions newsletter for our Windows customers and lots of other printed material. And some of this we've continued to this day. We've not stopped that because it's been very welcome. So I think we've learned quite a lot from what we've been doing over the last sort of 18 months. And that really brings me on to the key, the sort of key learnings and the key, I guess, some of the key challenges that we found. And I think that what we found was we reacted very quickly in what was a fast-moving situation. We have a business continuity plan which we activated. As I mentioned, we furloughed around about 85% of our employees, but we had to stay in touch, and that was very successful. But we had to start bringing people back early. And in my own department, communications, I had some of the sales managers saying, well, we're not doing any communications or enough communication. I said, well, we furloughed all my team. We suddenly had to bring people back into different key roles. And that, I think, has probably learned us, heaven forbid we ever have to do this again, what roles we need to keep in place rather than just sort of doing a fairly blanket furlough. And our customers were still trading. And as Mike said, they were expecting us to be open. And although we were open, we probably weren't open full enough for our customers. So we suddenly had to ramp up and service our customers. We found there was a bit of a risk of over communication of the COVID message. We brought into some research through a communications agency we work with. And they said, we've had enough. This probably came out about July time, I think it was July, August, where we've had enough of you telling us how to work in a COVID safe situation. We've had enough telling you about, COVID generally. We want you to move on, tell us what the future holds. So we quickly changed the approach with a lot of our communications and went on to very much more proactive stuff about, what the future holds, what new products are coming out, what innovations we're working on, et cetera, how we can support them. So that's a learning for us that you can probably overdo it. And I don't know if any of you found the same, but I think we did as consumers. I think we've probably got to the point where we just knew COVID was around. We knew the risk. You don't need to tell us anymore. And I think we probably over-egged it a little bit. As I mentioned, not all our customers responded well to digital communications, and that was a key learning for us. I think we had relied on that. And when they're not necessarily in their offices in front of their screens, how do we reach them? So hence we started to go with a lot of the more printed literature. And definitely, as Sharon said earlier, this Zoom fatigue has most certainly set in. We've had people just say to us, just come to my office and let's have a meeting, or just come and do a CPD. But in the end, our business continuity plan worked. It worked really well. We have reviewed and documented our response. So as I say, heaven forbid we have this situation again. If I'm not around and a lot of the other team aren't around, it's been documented and we can take that forward into the future. There's a sort of a book there of how we handled the pandemic in 2020, 2021. And the good news for us was that throughout all of this, we do what we call pulse survey, which is we survey our employees electronically, a number of questions about their engagement with the business. And the score actually went up this year. So throughout all that we've been through, and people being on furlough, probably losing money, not earning their usual salaries, and through all of the sort of the challenges we've had, our engagement score went up with our employees by a few points. And the feedback we've had was that despite all the challenges, despite it was a very difficult year, how we communicated and engaged with our employees was seen as very positive, and that we kept them informed every step of the way. So, we take that as a real kind of key success. So that's all from me. What I'll now do is hand back to Sharon.
Thanks, Stephen. Again, really, really helpful and really useful to hear it from a different perspective, from the comms side of things as well. And the lessons, again, that I think everyone might have encountered definitely in one shape or form over the last 18 months. But interesting that you reviewed it all and put things in place for if this, or I guess anything else happens. That's really good to think about. Any questions? Sorry, I was summing up there, but any questions? Mike?
Stephen, from the feedback that you got from the employees, was there one thing in particular that came back that they said we would have liked this to have been done differently or could have improved on?
I think the one thing I'd probably pick on would be the furlough, the fact that furlough is going on and on a bit. You know, we didn't actually know the end date for it. I think that probably was something that was frustrating for people, but we kept everybody informed and involved. But I think the fact that, you know, initially, you know, I think everybody kind of listened to what the Prime Minister said at the time. I think was his famous words were, was it 3 weeks to flatten the curve? And I think people thought they'd be coming back to work in 3 weeks. That 3 weeks became 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. And so I think that was probably something that, you know, we couldn't really do much about, but if there was something that we learned from that, you know, to maybe, you know, to try and manage expectations, we just didn't know when normality would return.
Uncertainty, yeah, the uncertainty.
Yeah.
A bit. Okay, thank you.
I've got one, Stephen, as well, if while we're waiting for anybody else. I'm just interested what, you know, Mike mentioned some of the challenges that I think are probably, you know, well documented in the news as well, that a lot of people are facing. Is that the same for your company? Because you mentioned really being global and having all those different either offices or factories all over the world. Do you feel that you're facing the same challenges that others are facing?
Regarding supply chain in particular?
Yeah, shipping.
So, I mean, I think it's probably no secret. I think we've had about 7 price increases this year, which is unknown. With shipping initially at the start of the year, we had real challenges with shipping. On our biggest business, which is our window profile manufacturing, we manufacture, as I mentioned, in Blaenau for Stiniog. And a lot of the raw material, we recycle it, so we can get that from our own plant in Runcorn. So we're not so hit on that, but we have had challenges bringing in polymer products. And yes, challenges around bringing in other products. We take products from 2 main factories in Germany and Spain. And naturally, we've had challenges bringing product in from there. Has been a big challenge, but it has eased, and it has, you know, it's certainly got a lot better. But it's been challenging, particularly the first 6 months, I would have said, were the most challenging.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Anyone else? Anyone got any questions? No? Okay. Very quiet. Okay, everyone. If there's no more questions, I just want to thank Mike and Stephen and their companies for sharing really their best practice over the last 18 months with us. I'm sure, I thought that was a hand up then, Jim, but it's a clap. Thank you very much, both. I'm sure if anybody's got any questions later, you'd be happy for us to put people in touch with you and keep that conversation going. Don't forget about the dates that I mentioned for any of those other future events. And in the meantime, I'll let you leave a little bit early and grab a coffee before your next Zoom meeting.
Let off for good behaviour, eh? That makes it work.
Definitely, been a very quiet group. What's going on?
The first for everything. First for everything.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Mark. Thanks,
everyone.
Stephen.
Bye.
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 Bye.